And there we go. So I just want to say thank you to Senator Caballero for joining today and as a means of introduction. This is City Councilman Steve McShane. This is a briefing on where the state's at, certainly as it relates to some of our most critical issues, housing, homelessness. As a brief background on the senator, she's been a champion for working families in California and certainly served the citizens of Salinas as a council member, our mayor, as an assemblywoman, and as part of the Brown administration, Secretary of Business, Consumer Affairs, Housing, and Services. Just a real leader when it comes to housing, and I know that that will be one of our topics we discuss today. So thank you so much for joining today, Senator, and maybe just a couple of words as to how things are going in Sacramento.
Well, it's an interesting time. The coronavirus obviously has really affected the way we do business and the way the Californians have been asked to change their lives. And that happened in mid-March, where we were all asked to shelter in place. And I went home to Salinas, and I did. So spent 2 months working out of my house, and all the staff was doing the same thing. And then we were called back into session because we are constitutionally required to have a budget by the end of this month. And so we came back to do precisely that. We've been working on the state budget. It's been a really expedited process. What we would do in 2.5 months, we've done in 2 weeks. And then the tragic and fatal incident that occurred with George Floyd has really changed the tenor of the conversations and has really put a spotlight on how badly African Americans are treated, in particular how deadly force is used against them way too many times. And I think that video just was horrific, and it's fundamentally going to change our society. So it's going to change what we do here in Sacramento as well. I came back to this week to looting and to destruction, and so it's been really sad to see our beautiful capital city trashed, really is the best way to say it. I am in sympathy with the protesters, and I understand the need for change, and I'm listening very carefully to the voices, and I take it really seriously. The last couple of days have been better in terms of the protest, and they've been peaceful. I think the intention was always to be peaceful, but along the way there were forces that decided they were going to take matters into their own hands. So things are coming back to normal, but it's really odd. I come into the Capitol when I need to. I need to present bills. We're working on the budget, and we're going to have it done in time. And it's going to be a real responsible budget. And but we're asked to leave when the protesters show up. So there's an evacuation of the Capitol in the afternoons usually.
Thank you for your leadership and standing in solidarity for peaceful protest. We've seen that with our police chief, our mayor in Salinas, and other leadership in law enforcement in the region. And I agree, there will be a much closer look at use of force and budget. And I can't help but ask, has there been any immediate discussion as to how the budget at the last minute here, very last minute, may be impacted by George Floyd or even legislative packages across the Capitol?
I think it's a little bit early to know that right now. There are bills that we've been asked in the Senate to reduce the number of bills that we proposed in January and to focus on the 5 disaster areas that we've been working on as a Senate. And we've had some really good working groups. One is housing, one is homelessness, one is wildfire, the insurance issues that have been created because of wildfires. Many people are unable to get insurance now, and the COVID-19 virus. And so in the Senate, we've really pared down our bills, and in recognition that that's going to be absolutely necessary. the assembly is a little bit different. I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn off my phone here, but
That's okay.
yeah, somebody's calling me and I need to let them know. I unfortunately pushed answer. So it's hard to know right now. I think what's really important is that last year, two really important pieces of legislation on use of force was passed. And one was AB 392, which changed the conditions under which use of force can be utilized. And my bill, which was SB 230, provided training and guidelines and new responsibilities for police officers that are working together, and the responsibility to stop excessive use of force if they see it, the responsibility to report it to their supervisors. The supervisors have the responsibility to investigate, and then that's all going to be part of the policy changes that all the departments are going to have to utilize. Post is they're preparing the guidelines, and they will be ready in August. And then every single police department will have to take those guidelines and make them part of their policy. So I believe that there's some changes coming. There's money in the budget for every single police agency to be retrained in de-escalation techniques and how to gain cooperation without using force. So we're on that road, and we've got a ways to go. We've got a long ways to go, but I'm happy to say that we did that tough work last year.
Great. And transitioning back to those 5 critical working areas in the Senate and your leadership in housing, here in Salinas and along the Central Coast, we stand in support of SB 1385. Very excited about that. Maybe you could elaborate on just that creative solution to providing more housing stock.
So one of the things that is really important is that every community is being asked to increase density and add more housing. And the challenge for many communities is that we're lucky in terms of rural California. We can move on out into ag land, range land, or parkland. Obviously, we want to be responsible and not do that if it's not necessary, and to utilize existing parcels of land that may no longer be as util as before. In other words, that the use has changed, and it's important to look at that land. So one of the things that we've seen over a period of time, and you know this in Salinas, is that people's shopping habits have been changing. And we saw the abandonment of kind of small grocery stores to the superstores. So we had a bunch of Lucky's and the Kmart, and what happened is initially the Cragans and the Blockbuster stores came in because they could utilize big space, and then people no longer go to Blockbusters, and the Cragans have become very, very small, and they're much more. Not very many of us do our car repairs anymore. So in addition, now with the COVID-19 pandemic, people have been asked to stay home. And so they're shopping on the internet. And you hear that Sears is going to be closing stores, Macy's is going to be closing stores, the Toys R Us, all of those, and JCPenney's is filed for bankruptcy. We have a store in our community of each one of those. And so now all of a sudden you're going to have vacant commercial that is going to be very difficult to find a major tenant. And there are a couple of stores that have been vacant for a period of time. So my bill would provide an expedited process to be able to go in and to create villages, which is mixed use housing and commercial development in these parcels, so that people because we desperately need condos, apartments, and if you know the Safeway Shopping Center in Creek Bridge, that has condos above it, and nobody even knows, right? It's beautiful and it works really well. So more of those kinds of development, and it gives us the ability as well to make the kinds of changes at the mall that could create a real nice village environment. where you could live in an apartment, go downstairs, eat dinner, take your laundry over to another place, and really create a more walkable community so that people don't need to get in their car to go somewhere. So that's what my bill does.
Very creative. In fact, I was doing a little research in anticipation of this call, and based on 2018 statistics, each American has nearly 24 square feet of retail. And in Canada, it's 16. In the UK, it's nearly 5 square feet. In China, it's like less than 3 square feet. So we do have a gluttony of retail and space. So I think this is really creative. Any comments on some of those other areas of interest? Certainly as it relates to homelessness, I know that that's a big one. I think that that's come up a lot, or any of the other areas that have been critical for the Senate as it relates to this session.
Well, we've got a package of bills, and the package of bills will provide an opportunity for expedited processes that very similar in terms of to what I'm doing. There is the Senate Pro Tem is authoring a bill that would provide an opportunity for duplexes and triplexes in some single-family home neighborhoods. Quite frankly, Steve, right now in my neighborhood, homes are being used like that. There are multiple families living in the residence. There's also a bill that Scott Wiener is working on that would allow properties that would allow the development of 10 homes on a property or 10 units with an expedited permit as well. So that if you're a small builder, it's a ministerial process. You have to follow all the local zoning and height requirements. We're not changing any of those details. That's left up to local government, but it's an attempt to get things moving a lot faster. And quite frankly, it is an expedited process so that people can't really jump on CEQA and try to delay projects, which has really been the problem in our area.
Maybe I don't want to take up too much time. I want to be sensitive to your scheduling. I'm so glad we could do this. Any word or two on the state budget? I mean, just kind of generally speaking, I mean, we obviously are going to be experiencing cuts. We went from this incredible surplus to, an incredible deficit. And I know, as a city, we're trying to preserve our workforce, our service levels. I mean, the state's probably going through the same things. And certainly as it relates to education, what would you flag or some of the significant, challenges?
Yeah, let me tell you that the framework that the Senate has been working with is totally different than the framework than what the governor had proposed. And it's important to understand that we perceive that there may be tremendous cuts, right? In that we're going to have to make cuts. The problem is we just don't know how much, because we extended the tax filing date from April 15th to July 15th, I think. And so we don't know what our tax revenue is going to look like. So when you don't, and then we have to pass a budget before then. And so the governor projected what he thought was going to come in, and then he cut a whole, he cut education, the universities, the courts, everything, and it included rollbacks of employee salaries. So it was, everything took a haircut. What the Senate did is said, look, and then the big question mark is the federal government has been making commitments to communities and states and entities, so small businesses, hospitals, schools, to create a relief program. And so there is a relief program being discussed right now. And what we don't know, did you get it back? You're good, Steve.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so what we don't know is what is the state going to get from the federal government? And do you make the cuts? And if we get the money, then you undo the cut. So what the governor did is said, we're going to take these cuts and we'll undo them if we get money.
Got it.
There'll be a trigger. And what we did is we said, look, in order to do that, if you do that, you're going to start laying off people, right? Every local government's going to lay off people. The universities, the school districts, they have to give a notice. And so rather than doing that, let's create a budget that says we've taken some stuff out of the budget. So there are cuts. They're really minimal right now. And what as part of that, we knew we were going to have to come back in August before we recess to make some adjustments to the budget. So rather than make the cuts now, if we have to make cuts, let's make them after we know what the federal government's going to do.
Yeah,
so we don't depend on the federal government in order to bail us out. It's just that if we're going to get any resources, we can put that into the analysis and make better choices. So that universities and schools and local governments are not having to make the staffing cuts right now. If we need to make them, we may need to make them later on. Once we know, number one, what our revenue is, and number two, what the federal government's going to do. And so I really like that. I like that how we've been very creative, and we're in the process of negotiating the final deal right now.
Yeah, now more than ever, I think the pressure on the federal government, and I think there's a lot of folks that aren't expecting much there, but that is important. And so as a city, we want to be supportive of you and of the Senate and of the state in that effort. Before we sign off here, anything else you'd leave us with? Just any messages to folks in the region?
So let me just say that the governor has really, part of our emergency system requires that counties make decisions about what should happen within the county, right? And that's historical. The state doesn't want to be going in and telling counties what to do. We've had some counties that have had no deaths. And so those counties are in really good positions. And frankly, they're all rural counties where people are distanced even on a good day, or even on a bad day. But Monterey County has moved into stage 2. And the question is, when does it move further into stage 2 and then into stage 3? So I just want to say that for the first time, I had to go get dog food last weekend. And I was really pretty scared at the number of cars I saw parked in parking lots. And as long as people are using social distancing and the masks, we're fine. People can go to the grocery stores and go to restaurants and stay 6 feet apart. But that's really important. And what I keep watching in county by county is how many tests are being done. And so now you can get tested even if you don't have any symptoms. And I would recommend anybody that's gone back to work in a physical location, get tested. You sign up for it, you go in and you take the test. So that's important. But the other thing is so you look at the number of tests, the number of infections, and then the number of deaths. And those are how you can track how capable we are of handling really sick people that have to go to the hospital. Because it is the people that end up in the hospital are not one demographic group. It's not all the old people. The number of deaths and serious hospitalizations between the age of 25 and 35 is pretty shocking. Nobody talks about it, but people need to know. And so my last message is, be careful out there. Use your masks. I have one with me all the time. When I come into the Capitol, the only reason I don't have it on is because I'm here in my office by myself. And when I come into the Capitol, I am not staffed. I am by myself. And I'm going to committees and I'm wearing the mask. You'll see that if you watch any of the committee hearings. And when I go out of my car for any reason, I have the mask on. So I want to ask people to do that, because you're doing it not for yourself. The mask is not for you. The mask is so that if you're an unwitting carrier of the virus, that you're protecting other people from the little droplets that come from your mouth and nose.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today and your leadership. For folks to get more information, sd12.ls sen.ca.gov. Your decades of public service serve us well here on the Central Coast. So thank you for your time, Senator, and I'll look forward to seeing you back here in Salinas, certainly after we have a budget and we're in a better place.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it very much. Keep up the good work in Salinas. Proud of
All
you.
right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.